Again, for folks that first time, I do record these. I put them on Facebook. I'm sorry, YouTube later on for people to see. If you don't want to be seen or heard, just mute or blank yourself. And let me go back here, and I can start this thing. Well, first of all, just to get started, 1982 World's Fair, Knoxville, Tennessee. Started off when they had this World's Fair in Spokane, Washington, and it was something everybody predicted was going to be an abject failure. City the size of Spokane could no way host and do a World's Fair. They did it. It turned out to be successful, and a lot of other cities around the United States started thinking, "Hey, if they could do it, why can't we do it?" And that was what happened in Knoxville. Some of the city leaders started thinking about we could do the same thing. So a committee was put together. They started working on it, and they appointed a fellow named Jake Butcher to be the head of it. Jake was a very influential man in Knoxville. One of these things where he was basically king of the city in Knoxville. Outside of there, pretty much unknown. Later years, he did become known. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Jake was put in charge of the World's Fair, and he was very much a driving force. About the only criticism that you find in the press for the talking about the Knoxville Fair was that it became known as Jake's Fair because it was his way or the highway. But they put together the plan, and they followed a cookbook that, if you've been on prior talks, will sound real familiar. We need to have a World's Fair. Where do we put it? Oh, we've got this old abandoned railroad yard. How about we put the World's Fair there? And that's really what happened here. They had a rail yard. It wasn't abandoned. It was basically almost abandoned, very low utilization. But there was still some utilization. So this led to a situation where you can put your World's Fair there, but the railroad was not going to give up the property, and they reserved the right to run a train through it every night. So you have, and we'll see as we go through the pictures, a train track going smack dab down the middle of the World's Fair. There was also a station, which I think had been unused at that point in time, became a restaurant. But it was basically a great exercise to do two things. One, to try to put Knoxville on the map, and second was to take this rail yard, get rid of it, and turn it into a public park. Knoxville, back in 1980, had been in a article in the Wall Street Journal where the Wall Street Journal was pretty savage to Knoxville and called it a scruffy little city. And it was kind of interesting because Knoxville took that as its motto. They started embracing the fact that they were the scruffy little city, and they decided that scruffy little city was going to have a World's Fair. So, it's blanking out here. Headline here: the scruffy little city did it. So they were very proud. The World's Fair came to be, and it was a success. So I've got by the way, the chat is open. If people are putting questions in the chat, I won't see them to the end, but feel free to put them in. I will go by. I always intentionally make several mistakes just so you have something to talk about. That's my way of covering up the fact that occasionally I get things wrong, and my wife will come up to me after and say, "Did you mean to say Nashville when you meant Knoxville or something?" Because our son went to college in Nashville, so I have Nashville in the brain. So we'll try to get that right. So let me see. I have to come here, share my screen. We'll go to the PowerPoint, and we'll get started. Okay, so again, 1982 World's Fair. It was a very small one. It came under the category of specialized exposition. There's different types of World's Fairs you can have. You can have a major one like the 1964 World's Fair. You can have flower shows. You can have specialized expositions of certain sizes and that. And they have certain rules of how often you can have them. That's how you can end up having a 1982 and then later a 1984 World's Fair, because they were not really considered by the Bureau of International Expositions to be World's Fairs. They were considered expos, but they used the title, the 1982 World's Fair, more commonly known in the US for World's Fair as opposed to Expo. So they worked on it for a number of years. They were very smart. It's very interesting. 1982 World's Fair had a very good relationship with the city and with the press. If you look into a lot of other fairs, 1984, the press turned against Robert Moses, savaged him and his fair even before it opened. Same thing, New Orleans, the press and politicians got mad at the fair, started knocking it before it even opened. Well, the Knoxville World's Fair was really different. It was a very well-received fair, very high marks when people went to it. And again, it was for the folks, like me that had gone to the 1964 fair or Expo 67 or anything. This was much, much smaller. Didn't have any of the big ride systems or the spectacular shows, but it was never intended to be. And they never advertised it as such. Living out here in Los Angeles at the time, you never heard that there was a 1982 World's Fair because the people that ran it knew that their market was unlikely to come all the way from Los Angeles to Knoxville, but maybe they could get the people from a certain surrounding area to come to Knoxville and visit. And they were very smart in their marketing. They took their marketing dollars, targeted in certain cities. There was an awful lot of bus tours that were brought into the town. Some people came for a bus tour for the day, others came for a weekend or whatever, but they worked a tremendous amount with bus and tour and prepackaged travel companies so that people could buy a ticket, go to Knoxville, never worry about having to find a hotel, getting a rental car, doing anything. They basically would go, say, to Baltimore, get on a bus, end up in Knoxville, spend 2-3 days, maybe stop at Pigeon Forge or something on the way back home. And it turned out to be pretty successful. So they had this big billboard outside the site letting you know it was coming. We're just about there. You can see it's 3 days away. Still lots of work going on. And even up to, and for the folks that worked on things like Epcot, be very familiar. The paint was not dry on many of the pavilions during the opening day ceremonies. So President Reagan came to town. He was a big backer of the fair, had been very vocal as far as supporting it. Diana Shore was the mistress of ceremonies for the opening ceremony. They had about 7,000 guests invited to come to it, and it was a well-received thing. And what I'll be doing is going through it and showing photos. This is one of the Kodak photo site signs. These are basically all amateur photography shots. Try to stay away, as people know from past talks, about pre-posed publicity photos and things like that, because again, trying to get what people would find of interest when they got there, as opposed to what the planners had originally thought. So the fair kicked off. It started off right away with a bang. Lots of people have been seeing it come. They wanted to come and visit, so long lines to get in. I think there were 3 different entrances to the fair, maybe 4, but we'll take a look. Here's the fair grounds. Basically a long, narrow World's Fair. You have the river down at the right side, some exhibits down there. But we'll be starting most of the activity. You come in on the far left where there's a kind of yellow arrow. You go down the center where there's the train line. Then there was an amusement section down by the river, and then the riverboat displays. So we'll be kind of hopscotching. Sometimes we'll hop to the left of the train track. Sometimes we'll hop to the right. We'll go back and forth, but we'll try to cover most of the attractions. And again, mention train track right down the middle of the thing. It's interesting. The Fair Corporation, like many others, kept voluminous records on everything, and they had, if you've been in Knoxville or that area in summer, you always have people with heat prostration and things like that. But they also had a steady stream of visitors with twisted ankles because of people coming across the railroad track. So definitely a different sort of ambiance to it. But again, it was a kind of long, narrow fair. We're up at the top now of the United States Pavilion, looking out across the end of the fair. You can see the China Pavilion in the back, the train tracks over to the right here, and again, head across existing roads, that sort of thing. The Sunsphere, of course, is the symbol, a great symbol, as a matter of fact, for a World's Fair, and it's great when you go to Knoxville today and see it. But it's a great tower up at the top with a restaurant, a observation lounge and that. And it was a metal covered in a gold foil, so it really shined. Super symbol. And at the bottom, you had a Hardee's restaurant. People remember Hardee's? I think they got bought out by Carl's Jr. or something, but it was a hamburger chain. And so you could come down at the bottom, get your hamburger, wait, go for a ride up to the top. And again, I mentioned the United States Pavilion. This was a beautiful building, great design, had a wonderful amount of display space inside. And the United States really went all out. As I mentioned, Reagan had been a big supporter of the fair. He committed the United States to do this pavilion. It was really the last of the spectacular United States pavilions built for a World's Fair. Unfortunately, they built it as a pavilion for the World's Fair, just like the pavilion, the '64 World's Fair. They did not build it with any real thought behind what do we do when the fair ends. So you build this wonderful building, you put solar panels on it, you make it energy efficient. Because one of the things was that this was the International Energy Expo. It was all themed about energy and how to use energy better. So they built this very energy efficient building, which had no planned purpose after the fair. Unfortunately, fell into disrepair, and I think it was 1991 the city finally had to tear it down. But it was a great building at its time. So again, lots of display space inside. The skylights made it very great for ambient light to come in, shine on the displays. And they had a wonderful set of displays about American technology. You had things about the space program. You had the Gossamer, which was a human-powered aircraft. You had things on American energy, American computers. It was really a showcase of American industry. And it was one of the better U.S. pavilions in many years. Again, just views of it around. They had displays of old technology, how different World's Fairs had introduced things that were commonplace today, the elevators, steam engines, things along that line. Again, saluting American history and American contributions. Again, old engine down below. They also had very nice for those of us that had been at other fairs. They had a display about the 1939 New York World's Fair, and for our '64 fans, myself included, they had a great display about the '64 fair. So it was really nice that they saluted that America had been having World's Fairs. It was very interesting. I don't think there was anything about Spokane here, even though it kind of gave the genesis of this fair. But it was nice to see that they went back and did salute some of the U.S. contributions to prior fairs. Outside, you had a gigantic American flag. It was a very proud moment, very nice at night, lit up and visible from a large portion of the fairground. And at the bottom, something very interesting. The United States Postal Service had this thing. And it was basically, this is where they were first introducing automated postage machines into post offices. So beforehand, everybody would go up to a clerk. The clerk would shuffle through their book of stamps. They would give you a stamp, you'd go. Now you could come into a post office and you would put your money in a machine and it would spit out a book of stamps or a roll of stamps or whatever. So this was really the prototype and the first introduction of automated postal services to the U.S. And if you came out to the fair and wanted to buy stamps, you could buy them, go to the blue mailbox and send it off there. Mentioned this was an energy fair, and it was interesting. This was an actual working electrical yard that was kind of conveniently there anyway, supplying the power for that part of the city. So we talked about in the 1984 World's Fair, they had a problem. What do you do with a giant power line through the middle of your World's Fair? They built the Wonderwall to masquerade that. But in this particular one, hey, let's paint it in bright colors, put signs up and explain to people exactly what a high voltage line is, what a step down transformer is, what filtered power is. So you had all these displays that you could actually see what an electrical power grid was about. You can also see how the city was just outside the edge of the fair. Again, this was a pocket World's Fair built in the middle of an existing city and an existing rail yard. So they had some real tight confines of how to get there. But it also made it really great that they didn't need a lot of parking for the fair. Matter of fact, it was very small amount of parking because most people would go to their hotels or live locally. They would, park on the outskirts, take a shuttle in, that sort of thing. So they were able to use most of their site for exhibits and not have to use it for infrastructure for things like parking. There was also this road went right through it. You can see it's kind of not exactly 1982 design, but with the big solid pillars in that. So again, let's take this road, repurpose it, put some exhibits up top. If you look at this picture, there's something very rare for the '82 World's Fair, and I'll give you a hint. Look underneath the viaduct, and there's somebody sitting on a bench. That's about the one complaint that a lot of people had that they're pretty valid on, that for whatever reason, the '82 World's Fair did not have a lot of open seating. There was seating at restaurants and snack bars and things like that. And maybe that was the intent to kind of say, if your feet are tired, you're going to sit down and have a beer or an ice cream or something. But as we look through the pictures, you will not see a tremendous number of benches that are out sitting there just for people to relax. We have a skyway because it's almost obligatory at a World's Fair to have a skyway. This is the exact type system used 2 years later at the '84 fair in New Orleans. It's basically no more than a ski lift, but it did give you a chance to get from one end of the fair to the other. You had some existing buildings that were maintained. This was called the Candy Factory. There's a few different buildings that had been there. They were earmarked. It's great when you go back to the site to see them being repurposed. There were a few old houses, old restaurants that had been earmarked for preservation. Nice to see they weren't torn down. But you had newer things. You had the Tennessee Amphitheater in the background, and you had this statue in the lake, which was a wind vane. It was a very modern sculpture. Matter of fact, I think the next one gives a different view of it. The wind going through the fair would turn this vane, and the idea was an example of a modern wind vane, power generating. I don't think it ever generated enough power to do anything than rotate on its own axis, but it was a very nice sort of thing to look out across this man-made lake, see it spinning around out there. And we're going to take a look at some of the international pavilions. Again, it was a World's Fair. It was sanctioned by the BIE, so a number of nations did attend. And they were pretty much from across the globe. We had, here you can see, obviously, Saudi Arabia, next to it, Korea. We had some European nations. There was a real hodgepodge, and that's what made it kind of interesting. It wasn't just a thing of, I would say Spokane was more heavily centered on nations of the Pacific region. This was really all across the board. You can also see that they were smart. If you look at the building, it's very utilitarian. It's basically a warehouse type building, different colored facades or whatever. But you could build these buildings very cheaply, very economically. You could tear them down, repurpose them, or do whatever. But you did not have to build, Saudi Arabia did not have to come and build its own massive thing and deal with it. Korea didn't have to do it. The Fair Corporation took care of working with them, getting the buildings built, and then the nations would come and do the outfitting of the interiors. So Korea was here. Korea was a very popular one. You had this long stairway going up to the pagoda. You had other pavilions in the back, again, about energy and that. But let's hop inside. They had lots of displays, as you can imagine, in all these international pavilions. They would go after two things: tourism and industrial advantages of working with that country. So what we could build for you, what we could sell for you, what we could buy from you. So there was about a 50-50 mix in most of the pavilions because there was also a tremendous effort in trying to get people to come and visit the countries, realizing that tourism is a very good way to bring in money, leave a very small footprint behind. So tremendous effort with movies, shows, dance troupes, all that sort of thing to interest you in the culture of it. Here they had a display of a typical Korean living room. Again, trying to explain to Americans how they lived in South Korea. It's clean, it's comfortable. Why don't you come over and visit us? Set of dolls there showing different ceremonies, rites, and things that were done there. Again, very different. Somebody mentioned on Facebook when I put up the mention of the talk how they went to this World's Fair. It was the first time they ever had Chinese food, because I guess Chinese food was not a big thing in Knoxville at the time. But that's what made all this fun. People could come out there and try a different meal, try a different drink, try a different experience. Sky Transpo mentioned, again, a ski lift. Somebody mentioned that this was then moved to a ski facility after the fair. But it was a great way to come and get a tour of it. Off to the right is the Tennessee Amphitheater. It was a open air theater, lots of concerts, lots of performances. There was talk about tearing it down after the fair because it was like everything else. It was sat there, it got in bad shape. Everybody said it's in such terrible shape, the only thing we can do is tear it down. Other people said, no, I think we can also save it. And if you go there today, the amphitheater is still there, and it's great that it was saved. You had different exhibits from companies. Most of the pavilions turned out to actually be from nations. but you did have a few different companies. So you had the Energy and Motion exhibit here done by Federal Express. They were, again, you know, obviously their big interest was getting people to move packages and everything. But if you came in, they had a whole great display about the various forms of energy and how you can harness energy. You can't really capture energy, but you can transform it from one form into another and later utilize it for a purpose that, you know, very different from its first original form. You also had, like, for example, here, you can't store wind energy, but you can have wind energy turn a windmill. That windmill can then pump water. It can turn generators and make electricity. So there's a lot of talk about how there were different forms of energy. Solar was just becoming a big thing. You can actually see to the left of the windmill here some solar panels up on the roof. There were displays about natural gas, shale oil, nuclear energy, basically any form of energy that was covered available on the planet was covered in one of the pavilions. In Australia, very popular pavilion, and a lot of people talk about one of their memories of the World's Fair is how friendly everybody was. And Australia had a particular reputation of having a very friendly pavilion, very friendly staff that people like to go and party with after the fair closed at night. So inside you have hosts and hostesses, this big panorama background you could pose with of pictures of Sydney, the Opera House, and the bridge there. They had a big tourist information area. You could walk up, say, I'm interested in going to Canberra or Melbourne, and they would pull out all the brochures. And if you were really, really interested, they would actually sit down and book you a trip right then and there. So you could go home, tell your family you're off to Australia and go have a trip. So the Australian Pavilion, a very, very popular one at the fair. Across from it, you have Canada. Canada being in many places a bilingual country, we had bilingual signs. They were making big, bold predictions that by this time we would all be driving hydrogen-powered cars. So again, technology and predictions are one thing, reality is another. But they did have some things that were kind of interesting. They talked about, you know, improvements in car engines and being more efficient. But they also had a thing in here about how offices are going to be transformed, and more people are going to be using computers. We're going to be going to a higher ratio of computer workers versus industrial workers, and that's going to be making a difference. They also had a big thing about shale oil. Again, back in 1982, most people think about an oil well being off the coast of, say, Louisiana or in Texas, pumping out oil in a liquid form. Here, they were talking about oil that's trapped between layers of rock and shale, and we have to go and find ways to get that out. And now, of course, shale oil extraction has become a big thing, all the discussions about fracking and all the rest of it. But in 1982, this was a very unused new technology they were looking at, and they had an example of here what a extraction plant might look at. Mentioned before, it was truly an international fair. This was the International Economic Union. There was a way by doing this, the EC was being formed, more nations were joining in it. And by coming together in a common pavilion, you could put a whole bunch of people together. And if you were, say, Belgium or Italy or whatever, and you didn't want to build your own pavilion, you could come under the umbrella of the EC pavilion. And inside, you could go and see France was here telling you about their high-speed trains, which, of course, are going to be totally common by this point in time. If you live out here in California and you have to go through the garbage we're going through with this bullet train fiasco they're trying to build, you just say, you know, it's amazing they had these trains 40 years ago in France, and out here we still don't have it, despite billions and billions of dollars being built. Netherlands had displays. A lot of these displays were very quiet, shall we say. Again, not a lot in terms of movies, or there were no big shows like Futurama putting you on a moving van or taking you around things. There were a lot of different displays. There were some movies, some slideshows, multimedia things. But for some of the smaller countries, they just came, put up displays like this, a little bit about their tourism with the little bridge off to the right and growing tulips. But then there would also be about, you know, what other things the Netherlands could bring you. Italy was showing you that they were a big thing. They had, you know, factories underway. Here's a way that they were cleaning up things. Mexico had a well-received pavilion. And one of the things that was well-received was they had performers who would come out into the street and entertain you. So mariachis. I imagine for most people in Knoxville, this was probably the first place they'd ever seen a mariachi band. So again, lots of stuff going on out in the street, lots of things to keep you entertained. We hop over to Japan, just back across the train track again. They had a great display here of the painting robot. And this thing would take a paintbrush and it would do a whole variety of paintings. And lucky kids would get to take home one of their genuine robotic paintings. They also had displays about tourism in Japan and how you would like to come over and visit and see it. Hungary was very popular because if everybody thinks about it, in 1982, what was the big thing? Rubik's Cube. So they made a big point of having a model of a stylized model of Rubik's Cube in there. And they actually had quite a bit of displays inside about how Hungary was facing the world's energy shortage head on and trying to be very proactive in terms of its power grid, its generation systems, and make it energy efficient. Outside, there were some model houses. This was an energy efficient house. It was all done because so many houses back at this point in time were being built without insulation, were being built without taking advantage of solar or things like that. So you had this posed as one example of a energy efficient house that you might live in. You had a display right nearby about gas energy, thinking about all the things that it could do. It could heat your house, it could cool your house, but it could also supply power plants. This was kind of a weird one. This was the energy efficient house, or the house of the future. And again, taking the idea of the energy efficient house 2 slides ago to an extreme, everything was energy efficient in this house. It was also uglier than heck. And we've not seen many of these pop up in our neighborhoods, thank goodness. But again, everything very highly insulated, lots of solar use, very, very high tech and very, very sterile and unlivable. Very different sort of display. There were 2 brothers that collected amazing amount of circus memorabilia over the year, and I think the name was Hunt. They built this world's largest collection of a miniature circus, and somehow one company decided we needed to put this circus on display. And I forget where the collection ended up. Might have been the Smithsonian, but it's an absolutely monumental thing that they did, putting this whole thing together. Had nothing to do with energy, whatsoever. But that's the way things are. You have a World's Fair, you bring people in, you have a theme, and maybe your pavilion is a little bit different, but it still is enough to attract people. You get attention, and you can have your success. Lots of entertainment at the fair. We mentioned before we had the Tennessee Amphitheater was a great outdoor thing. You also had the open air, I think it was the Elms Theater. You also had exhibit booths where people would do things like wood carving, making local artifacts, that sort of thing. So there were different sort of things that went on during the period of time. And this was a particular thing for 1 week of the fair. These are the different acts that were appearing there. And you had, again, comedy acts. So you had singers, you had dancers, you had, on this particular stage, you might come out and find somebody doing this comedy act, and obviously he's losing his pants here. 2 hours later, there might be a steel band from a Caribbean nation there doing it. An hour later, a folk singer. There was a constant stream of entertainment going on. And that's one of the things that was great. The organizers had this venue, and they basically said, you can come here and perform. Now, we're not necessarily going to pay you, but you might get some great experience. So it's sort of like their version of America's Got Talent. People come down there, you go there, you hope you put on your show, you hope everybody enjoys it, they remember you, and they go someplace else. So they ended up with the very nice issue that there were many more people that wanted to perform there than basically they could have there. I was going to say entertain, but it was a very well received thing, and it was also one of the spot with benches, so people could come, sit down, relax, enjoy the show. It was totally free, and just have a good time. For all of us that have gone to a Disney park and been on Splash Mountain or any other thing, get your picture taken at the end. They're trying to sell it to you. They had this here. You could have your World's Fair memories. At the end of the skyway, as you came down, somebody would be taking your picture with a Polaroid type camera, and you could order your memories, and they would make them into magnets for you. They would make it into a full-size picture you could take home. And they also had a button making machine. So if you wanted to have yourself or your loved one's picture on a button and pin it to your jacket for the rest of the day walking around the fair, you could come up and take your picture. Uh, this was kind of interesting pavilion. This was a inflatable dome. It was an energy efficient exhibit. They later ended up reusing this dome at the the New Orleans World's Fair. But again, do it cheap. No sense spending tons and tons of money on a pavilion that's going to be used for 6 months and tear it down. If you can go and do an inflatable building and it serves the exact same purpose, and it also gives it a kind of nice looking different shape, draws the eye to it, different colors and everything. So kind of a clever idea. And again, inflatable buildings, not the most common thing in 1982. It was also a very large African American exhibit down there. You can see they're saying the original energy source. And again, whole thing about African American history. Well, actually, African history at first, and then how it became a big thing here in the United States. So one of the earlier, there had been one at the Expo 84. I'm sorry, Expo 74, and now this one followed the suit of it at the 1982 fair. Whoops. The People's Republic of China was a big entry for the fair. Again, Reagan trying to normalize relationships with China, and that up to this point in time, you had a lot of things were done by Taiwan. Now you had the People's Republic of China, mainland China, coming, and they made a big presence at this fair. They had a very well-situated pavilion right at the end of the main street. So all day long, as you worked your way from the U.S. pavilion at one end, the China pavilion at the other, kind of symbolic there. You saw the China pavilion, and when you finally got down there, you could go in, and often had very, very long lines to get in. And they had all sorts of displays. There were some amazing needlepoint that were done in there, Chinese scenes. And you had lots of exhibits of Chinese artifacts, different dolls, statues, that sort of thing, intricate carved items. But one thing that was kind of disturbing about it, you see this picture here, for example, these very attractive horses in front of this very attractive screen, and there's something on the screen. It was a price tag. And they did the same thing with a lot of their other exhibits. We're not looking at priceless ancient Chinese artifacts. You could do that. They actually brought some bricks over from the Great Wall of China. But most of these things were very new. They actually had artists that were sitting there painting things in front of you when it's something custom done. But basically the entire pavilion was for sale, which made it kind of tacky. They did the exact same thing when they got to the 1984 fair in New Orleans. So you could come in and you could look at it and go, oh, that's a really nice vase. I'll pay you my $800 for it. They'd mark it sold. You could walk around for the rest of the fair for the day, come by, they'd open up the display case, take it down, wrap it in bubble wrap, and you could carry part of the World's Fair home with you. To me, it's pretty tacky to have a World's Fair exhibit that's just a gift shop. I mean, a gift shop is fine. Everybody, my wife knows I've bought way, way too many World's Fair gifts, but that be selling your pavilion off during the middle of the fair is a little on the tacky side. They also had a big thing about how China was a major coal producing nation, and if you needed coal, you could come over to China and get it, which is kind of interesting to think how close Knoxville is to America's major coal producing area. There were probably not too many people ready to import Chinese coal into the United States. I don't think that ever became a real business, but they had a display about that. They also talked about how they were getting into solar and other technologies as well. Again, one of the gates going into the fair, and it was kind of the nice thing that they had these color-coded gates, so you could remember where you parked. You were at the green gate, the orange gate, or whatever. But if you can see, the fact that it was in this little valley, had trees around the outside, and there were some nice little kind of areas off to the side. You could sit down, have your picnic lunch, relax, get away from the main part of the fair. As you worked your way down past the China pavilion, you can see there were a couple more countries that were down below, Egypt and Peru. Both had exhibits very well received, again, about their history, mummies, that sort of thing. But they also had a number of rides. They had an amusement area, and they didn't have enough room to put in a full-scale roller coaster as originally been planned, but they did have the almost obligatory log flume ride you can see off to the left, a carousel, This had a German name. You can see it down at the bottom of the picture. I will not try to pronounce it. I don't remember what the German word it means. It's in Cotter, it translates to the ride that must be avoided. I do not like getting spun in high-speed circles, but it was a very popular ride. You also had some amusement type things, you know, games of chance. So here people are doing the thing where you throw the ball, get it through the hoop, and try to win your horse race. Really, you know, not high tech or anything, but a very popular area, particularly at night. The sun would go down. A lot of people spent a lot of time in the amusement area and enjoying themselves, and it was well received. Mentioned earlier, one thing by the end of the day, a lot of people sitting down relaxing. There were not a lot of benches as you look through the pictures. Again, try to find them. You won't. But you could go in, you could relax. One of the older buildings on the site had been repurposed as the Clydesdale Pub. You could go in and get yourself a cold one. Or you could go into the very popular Stroh House Brewery pub in here. Not a great picture, hard to get with the amount of lighting in there. But they had an oompa band playing, very, very popular. A lot of the staff members talked about how they like to go in there and relax after a shift. I love this car. I don't know if it's still out there driving around, but it seems like it'd be a great way to get attention as you came down the road. Talk about getting pulled over for a cop though for an open container, right? You know, driving around an open top car. And there were all sorts of food things you could relax with. You could go and get yourself some ice cream and funnel cakes. Interesting, I don't think there are any Belgian waffle stands at this fair. We've seen them at all sorts of other fairs. Of course, everybody knew they were a big thing in New York, the thing in Seattle, Spokane had them. I don't think I ever spotted a Belgian waffle, but you could get a funnel cake, and that was just as good. Or you could go over and get some knockwurst. Again, they had these nice picnic areas off to the side, shaded, lots of umbrellas, that sort of thing. Down to the river, they had a Tennessee Valley Authority barge. They also had one of the river boats that operated down there, do dredging, things like that. But the Tennessee Valley Authority, for people that are familiar with it, formed back in the 1930s as a way to provide more power, flooding stability, that sort of thing through the area. So you could go onto this barge of theirs, which had been outfitted with solar panels, and they had a whole thing explaining what the TVA does, how they were modernizing their systems to take advantage of current technology. Each day you had two parades that went through the fairgrounds. You had a daytime parade, and they had a World's Fair band. They have their uniforms in the back emblazoned with the fair symbol, but they would also invite other participating bands from outside the area to come in, join for the day. Again, we've seen that at prior talks. It's a great way to get the people from, say, Cotterville to come, invite the Cotterville band to march in the parade, and then everybody wants to come and see their son, their daughter, their brother, their neighbor go. So the entire town of Cotterville will come to the World's Fair on Cotterville Day. The next day will be, I don't know, Dave Englishville Day, and his band will come and march. So very, very smart marketing. You had the Clydesdales, the Anheuser-Busch had every day they would take the Clydesdales through. They had a Dalmatian up there on the top of their fire wagon. And again, the bands would come through and march through. You had entertainers, different people to keep the crowd going. And at night, a totally different parade, the Expo Express Parade. It was kind of their version of the Main Street Electrical Parade. You had all these electric-powered vehicles coming down with these lights glowing, music playing from speakers on both the floats and along the parade route. And it was just kind of a fun, kitschy sort of thing with all these lights and colors, and something, again, that you hadn't seen back home. Sign there for the atom, you know, again, an energy theme. But it was a kind of popular nighttime activity. You also had night, again, the amusement area was pretty popular. That was the world's largest Ferris wheel at the time. After the fair, it's been sold. It's in Darien, Ohio, I think it is. It's still there. You can still go and ride it today. But it's, again, it was very famous at the time, being the world's largest one. People that love to go on different things. If you're a World's Fair fan, you go to World's Fairs. If you're a roller coaster fan, you go to theme parks. In this particular case, if you're a Ferris wheel fan, you had to go ride the biggest one in the world. And at night, it was very pleasant. The heat would die down a bit. The fair was very well lit up at night. It was very pleasant. the pavilions would generally close at a certain time. The entertainment area would stay open. But again, there were a lot of concerts being held at night in the Tennessee Amphitheater. So the fair did go into the late night hours. And at night, they had a big fireworks show and a big laser show. And again, it's interesting to see the things people were talking about on Facebook, but the lasers, they had lasers at one end and lasers at the other end, and they were choreographed to music, and they would go lighting up the light. Again, things we take for granted today. A laser, yeah, everybody has them. You have them in a little pen that you drive your cat with, taking your little laser pointer and your cat chases around the room. Well, in 1982, lasers were, not the most common thing, and having a big laser show out over a city area at night was a kind of spectacular thing. But the fair ended, as all fairs do. This was taken the week after the fair closed. The crowds are gone. And very, very quickly, it all started to come down. There's no sense. You think about these things ending and then they're going to sit there for a while. No, they end and they get taken down right away, because every day that it's there, somebody has to be paying security, somebody has to be paying power and all that sort of thing. So now it comes time, tear the fair down. You can see the train track, of course, still there. Start taking pavilions apart right away. So many of these pavilions have been built with the idea that they were going to be temporary, and the pieces could be sold off. The air conditioning systems, the audio-visual systems, a lot of this stuff was already spoken for. You had companies that had already done package deals that we will buy your pavilion from you, we will cut it into pieces, and you don't have to deal with it. We'll just take care of it for you. So you take your displays, but we'll take out everything of salvage value to it. And like I said, 1 week after the fair ended, it was being taken to pieces. The restrooms taken apart, gift shops emptied, everything going home. So, it didn't take much to take some of this the stuff to pieces. And this is kind of an example. Here's the Japan Pavilion. Off to the right, you can see the basically an air curtain system. It kept the hot air out, cold air in during the fair. Well, they've taken that off. They dumped it to the side. They've totally ripped out the front doors and made a real mess of it, because they're driving forklifts in and out of this pavilion, emptying it out as fast as possible. You were never going to need to close the front door again, so why keep it? Just smash it down and go driving around with your forklifts. So the fair was taken down and pretty much forgotten, like so many other fairs. Well, before I get into the Simpson visit here, the fair theoretically made a profit, amazing, huge profit of $57. Yeah, not $57.05, $57. And it became a real interesting situation. Jake Butcher, the guy that had been responsible for leading the fair, was very proud that he had turned a profit. He promised he was going to make a profit. Well, a year or two after this, Jake Butcher made the papers by being involved in the savings and loan scandal that almost ruined the S&L industry here in the United States. His company was seized by the federal government, put into receivership. There were all sorts of allegations that the only way the World's Fair had been built, operated, and, quote, made a profit was that Jake had secretly subsidized it. Don't think any of that was ever proven, but Jake ended up becoming from the top of the heap in Knoxville society and politics down to the bottom. So now they end up with the World's Fair, $57 in the bank, and they don't have the money left to turn it into the beautiful park and everything else they had done. So the Sunsphere was there, but it was allowed, as just like the New York State Pavilion, to deteriorate. It was closed, and it wasn't not much being done with it. So the Simpsons decided to poke fun with it in an episode where they go off for a trip, and they discover a guidebook here of all the wonderful things you can see in Knoxville. And if you look in the book, it says 1982. Well, I think this episode was done in 1996. So they decide they're going to go to Knoxville and see the wonders of the World's Fair. And all the way they're driving there, the kid is reading about the wonderful things they're going to find when they get to the Knoxville World's Fair. And Bart is just super excited about seeing it. Well, they get there, and there's not much left. I mean, it's in bad shape. You can see holes up in the Sunsphere, remnants of some of the pavilions and that sort of thing. They come and they meet a guy that says, oh, yeah, the World's Fair, that's over. And, the Sunsphere, no, it's the wig sphere. I store my extra wigs up there. So in Simpson Land, it became the Wig Sphere. They're very disappointed. Bart decides he's going to throw a rock at the Sunsphere, which is in such bad shape. It comes tumbling down, and that's the end of the Knoxville World's Fair. Except not quite the end. Knoxville really seriously got its act together. Carol and I were there in 2012. Mentioned our son went to school in Nashville. We drove over to Knoxville to take a look at it, and it's a World's Fair park that any city would really be proud of. They did a very, very nice job on reutilizing the land, and it's in great shape. And if you're anywhere in the area, thoroughly recommend you go to visit it. They had great fountains, kids jumping out there, having a great time with it. And they do have displays commemorating the fact that it was a World's Fair site. This particular spot stood so and such, so you can kind of familiarize yourself with it. The Flag Plaza, these were the flags of all the nations that had participated in the 82 fair. Again, big green area out there. You can rent this. You can have different events out there. So if you want to have a Renaissance fair or some particular event, you can come out here and rent it from the city and put your tents up, have a great time. The bridge is still there. It's very nice that they have kept water elements to it. The Sunsphere looks absolutely phenomenal in these shots. Kind of fun to go see it. Went up to the top of the Sunsphere. Train tracks still there. I guess one train still goes through at night or so. But again, they're getting ready for a concert here. What impressed me, it was in very nice condition. Not a sign of anything being run down or ticky-tacky or anything. It was a very nice environment. Up at the top of the Sunsphere, there were two different levels in use at the time. This was one that was a catering hall. I was asking them about this particular model of the Sunsphere. They said a lot of the brides and bridegrooms that come and get married like to have this in the background so they can kind of point out to people they're in the Sunsphere. So it was a kind of interesting thing. You get great views of the city. Again, very nicely done. Now, again, it had been sat there for years in bad shape. They were getting it revitalized. So the effort was underway at that point in time to redo the kitchens, to turn it into a full restaurant, get everything going back again. We have not been back there in the years since, so I don't know what the current status is. But you had very nice views of the whole city, and again, different signs that would point out what was here in 1980, what was here in 1982, what was here, whatever. So really kind of nice history lesson. Looking down, the Tennessee Amphitheater, as I mentioned, had been earmarked for demolition, had been saved, put a new roof on it, and is again being used for concerts. There was one there that night we were visiting. And this look again, the dry river bed coming out of it, heading down towards the real river. They built a convention center. You can see the building standing off to the right, salvaged some parts of the World's Fair buildings, expanded, built it out there. But that's the look back at the 82 World's Fair. For folks that haven't seen my site before, it's worldsfairphotos.com/Zoom. I'll have the a link up to this talk online, and I'll have the schedule for future talks up there. I do have some stuff for the 82 fair on my site. It's on my list of pavilions to get to as I update the site. I'm currently updating 1967, so I'm working my chronology through them. And at my current rate, I'll be there for the 60th anniversary of the fair. But that is the end of the presentation. So let's see, questions, group chats, that sort of thing. So first of all, appreciate folks hanging around. Beth, I grew up in Memphis and was heavily advertised there, almost to the point that it felt like a civic duty. Now, Beth, did you see anything, anybody you knew, or any yourself in any of the pictures there?
No, I kept a close eye, but nobody looked familiar.
Oh, okay. Now, let's see. My parents helped design a dome house and build hexadome homes. They prefab parts in the whole house, provided for a builder. Oh, okay. So, Leslie, you were in a hexadome house, huh?
Yeah, they didn't do it for the fair, but your comments about the hexadome or the dome house and their geodesic domes and other kinds. Anyway, I was just saying that my parents built some really nice hexadome houses. So.
Yeah, like anything else, you can build a house that's great for your family, or you can build a house that have 11 million people come through it. As a matter of fact, that's how many people came to the Knoxville World's Fair. So when I say some of these things are ugly and everything, kind of pointing out the fact that, you know, they have to be done as a design, just like you had the Monsanto house at Disneyland. You know, I mean, you have to build extra wide doorways and extra, you know, everything's got to accommodate a huge amount of visitors and everybody going through it. So that one just, it was, they didn't put a lot into decor in it. They really put a lot into the energy efficient part of it. And being energy efficient is great, but people also, I think, want to feel comfortable. So someday you have to show us pictures of your dome house.
Well, have you seen there's a dome house on the freeway on the 15 in Victorville?
Yes, yeah.
That's my parents' their what do you call it? A demonstration house. It's a model home. That's it. That they built back then, and were there for people, visitors to come and see what the dome house looked like. So
no kidding. Wow.
And they built one that was a church in Poway. I never got to see it, and I don't know how big it is, but it was built as a church. Anyway,
neat.
Just a little trivia there.
And then Marilyn says that her father took several hours of video. Oh, I'd love to see those. You know, it's funny. You know, he's mentioning no sound back then in pedestrian land. You know, I had a Super 8 camera, sound camera that I took different movies of different things. I got to go dig some of those things out, but it was so expensive going, you know, doing Super 8 sound at the time. And then poor Carol knows when video came out, you know, there's videos I took tramping all over Disneyland, Disney World, Epcot when it opened, but you had to have a backpack, you know, a whole separate video camera with this giant 1/2-inch wide cable to the camera and everything. And now, of course, we all have it on our phone, so it's changed so much.
Yes, I apologize. I was having some trouble on unmuting and finding the picture again. He has hours of videos, and I was going to get with you after. Maybe I could get you a copy of some of those.
I'd love to see them. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, again, all these fairs and still pictures is one thing. When you see them in videos, you know, you don't realize how many things rotated, turned, moved, or just the, you know, the pictures of the flags flapping in the breeze, or the crowds reacting to a, you know, a clown going by juggling or stuff like that. The animated part of it definitely makes a real plus. So yeah, please get in touch with me. I'd love to get a chance to see those.
Yeah, they're wonderful. We had a little sort of runabout boat, so he has them from the water coming up. You know, they had a whole place you could dock down there on the river, and he's got pictures of that, and just about every pavilion. It's funny you mentioned the Jake Butcher situation. My father was a judge at the time, and he actually sat on the Jake Butcher case.
Oh, goodness.
So there's a lot of history there, but and the whole kind of downtown business community were all laughing at him because he would run down every day at lunch and take all these videos. He just thought it was wonderful. He was having a great time. Got the whole family season passes, and I was at the University of Tennessee at the time. So
just next door.
Yes, we just loved it. We were down there, you know, several times a week, I would say.
Yeah, season pass, I believe, for an adult was $100, which was a real good visit. Yeah. Yeah, so people are saying, "Oh, I got a season pass, and we went 49 times," and other people, "Oh, we went 52." And you know, it's you know, that it's again, you know, what's really interesting is you do look at every fair. If there's people who like it, people who hate it. I posted about this talk yesterday, and one guy, as a matter of fact, he's on the call here, I believe, was saying he got mugged at the fair, so he didn't have a really good time. But most people came out of the fair very, very positive. You know, because the fair didn't oversell itself. You know, they had never said it was going to be the biggest, best World's Fair you ever saw. They said it's going to be the Knoxville World's Fair with our spin on it. And you know, Carol has a story how when we went to Tennessee for one time, she got sick on the plane, and we were at the emergency room, and you know, we're trying to figure out what's wrong with her, how come she passed out and everything. And the people in the next cubicle are saying, "Oh, as long as you're here in town, you got to go to this restaurant, and you got to go see this museum," and you know, super, super friendly state. So, and that's what most people that were posting on the Facebook stuff were talking about. You know, I never been to Tennessee before, but boy, the people sure were friendly, and it was great that people came away. If you weren't mugged, they came away with that attitude. Just going back to the questions here, I saw a couple scroll off here 1 second. let's see. Oh, Maya is here from Dubai, where the U.S. will participate at Expo 2020. Yeah, it's really sad that that wasn't the 2020. I guess it's going to be 2021 now due to the pandemic. But I'd love to see or more if it becomes safe again. That's certainly on the list of potential things to get it out of the house, and that's one heck of a way to get rid of cabin fever. So appreciate you joining us all the way from Dubai. Barry was in the opening day combined high school band that performed in the ceremonies. Oh, and he's one of the ones that went 49 times. So you got your money worth out of your pass. Yeah, it'd be great. Let's see. Great to have you share historical pictures of World's Fairs. And she sent us a thing at usapavilion.org. I will get in touch with you, Maya. I had actually tried sending the State Department histories, pictures of World's Fairs. And if you want any more, if they're any use to you whatsoever, please let me know. I can absolutely inundate you with pictures from World's Fairs and be more than glad to do it. Derek, Super 8 film doubled in price after the Hunt brothers. Oh yeah, when they tried to get the silver manufacturing, that was a real mess. So yeah, it was super expensive to do film. Unbelievable. Did train ever come through when the fair was open? No, they did it at night. They had the restriction that the fair was open during the day, so they didn't have to stop and get everybody to go off to the side. So nobody was run over by a train, but as I mentioned, they had a lot of problems with sprained ankles of people, twisting their legs on the train tracks. Let's see. Stopped the site in '98. The Sunsphere was in terrible shape. Yeah, it had gone real downhill, and like I said, when you go there today, well, we were there 8 years ago. It looked brand new. I mean, the entire fairgrounds was really spectacular. I mean, it was. The plants are great. The buildings are in great shape. You would have really thought that everything had been built that particular year. So very gratifying to see that Knoxville, took their ruined park and made it into a good park again. Let's see. Marilyn's hopping off for another commitment. Yeah, it will be recorded and it will be posted on the site. All the other talks are there. And so that was me talking. Other people, thoughts of the fair, memories, things that you'd like to share.
Yeah, Bill, I have to say, it looks like a nice little fair, and they try to cater to the local people, and I can see where they would have enjoyed it. But after seeing what they had in New York with this large, spectacular architecture and the ride-through exhibits, I would have been kind of let down by it.
Yeah, I think some people were. Again, if you came from seeing New York and you got down there, it'd be a whole different situation. But again, they didn't advertise it really in New York. They didn't advertise in LA. They didn't advertise in Chicago. They went for a market very much around their area, basically that you could come to, go to, and see it. And they were very smart in that regard. I mean, did anybody in New York remember seeing any ads for the Knoxville World's Fair? I mean, they just didn't talk about it. You're trying to get somebody to come all the way down there. They weren't going to do it. So why spend the money on it?
Plus, Knoxville is a rather small city.
Yeah.
And doesn't have the sophistication. If anyone's from Knoxville, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it doesn't have the sophistication of a city like New York that expects so much more. So this was a big thing for them.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I only knew about it from looking at your website, Bill. It's the only reason I was aware of it.
Oh.
Yeah. No. Being from Knoxville, I would offer that it sort of has that simple, it was very practical sort of setup. It was small. It was what they could do. I know they didn't really advertise. I can remember being aware that it was, as you said, just locally marketed right to the surrounding states primarily. And I know when they came out with the I don't know who it was, the New York reporter that referred to us as the Scruffy Little City, the typical attitude in Tennessee was, they didn't really care that that's what they thought, quite frankly. It was like, well, you don't need to come then. And there probably would not really be interested in, the same kind of thing that they would have done in New York anyway. So, and they obviously didn't have that kind of funding to accomplish that kind of thing either. So,
He also didn't have the space. I mean, there was just no way if you had taken something like the General Motors Futurama Pavilion or the Ford Pavilion from the 64 fair and plunked them down in Knoxville, you would have filled up half the fair site. So that they did not go for those spectacular, sort of things. And again, what was nice about it, it actually had much more of an international presence than an industrial presence. So you didn't have the big car companies there. You didn't have the big, different companies, airlines or whatever. So you ended up having, again, Peru. Peru was not at the 64 World's Fair. Matter of fact, it was at the 39, but it hasn't been at very many others. But this was a great chance. Why Peru decided to exhibit in Knoxville is, unknown to me. But very popular pavilion and very popular reception. And a lot of people said, hey, first chance I ever had to have Peruvian food. So it was great marketing for a lot of people.
I think Peru must have come on later though, because I had pulled out the guidebook from '82, and there's a section at the beginning about all the international pavilions and a section about corporate sponsors and state exhibits. And then in the very back, there's a page for Peru, almost as if the book layout was completed and then Peru was added on. And there were a couple of corporate sponsors at the end that are just tacked on like that too. So Peru must have been a later entry.
Yeah, I think they actually ended up filling somebody else's space that decided at the last minute that they couldn't come through. So, but again, glad that they made it. It's certainly a chance to see something you don't see in others. But yeah, that happens a couple of times. People build something, you get ready to go, and you get right down to it, and the funding doesn't happen. And that's how, like in New York at the 64 fair, they built the Argentinian Pavilion, but it was never the Argentinian Pavilion because after they built it, they didn't have the money to run it. So it became the first fine art museum and then a Canadian buffet restaurant. So sometimes people, think they get their funding in steps and stages, and that final stage, somebody says, ain't gonna happen. So Peru snuck in somehow, but it was a great pavilion that they did. Barry.
Yeah, I was going to say the Federal Express Pavilion that you mentioned before. It would be great if anybody had recordings of the show that was inside there. There was an audio-visual experience. There were interior lasers, the songs, and the message was about the future of communications and how humanity was becoming more isolated. And it was an amazing thing. It really impressed me as a kid. I was a sophomore in high school when I went to there. And so a lot of the exhibits were like that as well. They were looking towards the future and thinking of all these advances that man is making. Where are they taking us? We've got great energy future, but what does that mean for our future as a whole? So I think the 82 World's Fair was one of the first to kind of look and be a little more introspective about, we've got these great advances, but what does that mean for humanity?
That's true. Now, there's a fellow, Jim Brown's up in one of the corners here. He's friends with one of the guys that actually designed that pavilion. He was hoping he was going to be able to be here today, but he just had open heart surgery. So, Jim, you might want to take some of those comments back. I think he'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I have told him that you have replays of these presentations on your website, and I'll have him watch that. And real quickly, he had a lot to do with the show that was inside the Federal Express. In fact, it was his idea to put the TV screens out in the queue area. So people, in fact, it hadn't been done too much until that time, so that people could be entertained while they were outside. And those TV screens were more about the corporate message. But once people got into the pavilion, just like the Johnson Wax Pavilion at 64, there was no mention of the product. It was all about the human spirit and the communication and all that, which put the Federal Express in a good light without actually mentioning their products.
Yeah, they were probably one of the largest corporate, pavilions at the fair. I think they had I can't think of any other company that had a larger footprint than they did.
And one interesting note is that when Leonard was designing the pavilion, he hired, God, I could think of the name right now, but it'll come to me, to do the audiovisual presentation. And I went to visit this guy that did the audiovisual, and he had set up that hexagon screen matrix. It's sort of like the matrix, like all these thumbnails on Zoom. but in these hexagon shapes, 6-sided figures. And he set this up basically in his apartment. And where in real life the screens are about 3 or 4 feet wide, in his apartment they're about the size of a computer screen. And he brought me in there, and he literally ran the show and had banks of projectors in the back of this room that was once his living room, and had to get special permission from the landlord to bring up power into that, because each projector took like 300 watts. So
Yeah.
it's too bad he can't join us today, but we're hoping that he recovers from his open heart surgery, the second one he had.
Yeah, I'd love to get him to join us in one of the weeks and reminisce about it, not just this, but a number of his other projects as well. So, anybody else, any thoughts on Knoxville? Again, if you're anywhere, like Glenn Barker mentioned, a lot of the people are kind of busy on something else. It was the race to open Epcot, at the time. So a lot of the Disney folks didn't make it over there. But it was, again, if you're in the area, even if you did not go to the fair in '82, if you're anywhere in Knoxville, do stop by and take a ride up to the Wig Sphere and and go and enjoy it. It's very nice to see what the city did with the park. So,
I have another question. Oh, sorry. I have another question from the guidebook. There's a 2-page spread called Remembering Ferris Past, and it has a big mural. Can you see that? There's a picture of a mural, and you could apparently write in and get a poster of this mural, but I haven't seen anything else about this mural, where it might have been at the fair. Does that look familiar?
Doesn't ring a bell, and I don't have my guidebook here, but I did see when you held it up the Seattle arches and some other odds.
Right.
So maybe you can still write in and get a copy.
For $6.95. Yes.
That would be a heck of a deal.
Say, while you're in Tennessee, did you ever get over to Nashville and see the Parthenon from their World's Fair?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, our son went to Vanderbilt University. So we went to Nashville many, many times. Move him in at the beginning of every year and move him out at the end and go visit in between and that. And yeah, the Parthenon is just great. It still looks so strange sitting up there, but we would go there and there's the Parthenon, and behind it, I liked it. There's a big old steam locomotive. So it's great to go and visit. Nashville's another great town. So, I mean, Tennessee is great except for the humidity. And anybody else? Well, again, it's where is it? Oh, Cliff's waving. Did you have something, Cliff, you'd like to say? No, just waving. Okay. Well, appreciate everybody joining us. It was going to be about 100 outside today, so it's nice to be here in the air condition. Next week, I will do Freedom Land. Again, for folks not familiar with it, it was in the theme park in Bronx, New York, built by ex-Disneyland people that decided, hey, everything that works so well in Disneyland will work if we build it here on the East Coast. And they found out they were wrong. Sometimes you can't do things the same way and expect the same result. Well, the trouble is they didn't do it quite the same way, which we'll talk about. They did it sort of on the cheap in some respects, and it showed. But do that next week. Appreciate it. So I've mentioned before, if there's other talks or things people are interested in, please feel free to drop me a note. If there's a particular fair or a theme park or something that you would like to share that is not on the list, I am absolutely open to guest host. I will absolutely share all the profits from this with you. Oh, Dave, as soon as I said profits, Dave's hand went up. No, his hand was up beforehand. Yeah, profits. There are none, but anyway.
Well, with your interest in trains, you might consider a series of the steam train or train museums around the country. There's many. I'm interested in trains too, not with a passion, but I think that's amazing. But there's so many of them that I have wanted to go see. There's the one in near Sacramento. There's the one that's up to 395. There's one in Paris. Have you ever thought about doing a series? Maybe there's not enough people that care, but I
might do it. But
steam.
Yeah,
Steam.
I just one second. I might do something about trains, except for my poor wife. she already knows that if there's a steam train, I say, hey, it's only a 5.5 hour drive from where we're staying. So we have been on steam trains across the U.S. We've been on trains in Europe. We've been on trains like we love both to go to England. And oh, there's one here we haven't been on, or we haven't been on this one lately. So yeah, I might do it again. I just a train nut for whatever reason. So
One outside Atlanta that we went to, the
oh, the General,
Yeah.
the General from the Great Locomotive Chase. Yeah, so you know, she's been very, very patient, you know, as I run around and look at trains. Brock, you had your hand up?
Yeah, you were mentioning about the trains, and I don't know how many people here on this have ever been up 395 because that came up too. In Independence, there was this locomotive that used to sit right along the highway all the time on a piece of track, and then it disappeared under a tent for many years, and then it disappeared completely because they actually had spent all that time completely rebuilding it so it is now a functioning steam engine, and they moved it into its own building just about a mile away in a museum there that's the Eastern Sierra Museum, and it has a very short section of track that it can run it up and down. It really needs more track because it's a beautiful engine. But that was really interesting that they had actually rebuilt we thought they were just refurbishing it so it looked nice again, and they made it a functioning train.
Okay,
well, I'm
Carol,
gonna go see that next time.
road trip.
well, I was just thinking for the train theme, what if every one of you that has an interest in trains adopted a particular train and researched it and presented that as part of a talk?
Yeah, we could do that.
We do that with, I'm a docent at the Getty Museum, and we've been taking artwork and presenting it after we do research. So everyone learns a lot more detail than they knew before about it. It's really interesting, and I think it would lend itself to.
Yeah, I'll look into a shared train
then
experience.
you don't have to do all the work.
Well, I was thinking a program, 5 minutes on each place, and just kind of hop from place to place.
That's true.
Without a lot of detail, just one Saturday with the theme of trains I have seen.
Yeah.
And I would find that fascinating. Anyway.
Yeah, we could work that out. Now, Beth mentioned the museum with the General about 2 miles from my house. So, well, we were there. We didn't even know to stop on by. Great museum. I just love it. And I mean, the thing that I really enjoy about the General was that it's not just a train, but the history behind that train and the importance that it made for the Civil War. And the fact that people had the foresight to save it, you know, and it's been at so many World's Fairs and exhibits and that. So we were there and got a real kick out of going in and seeing it. And to think that because the Great Locomotive Chase, the Disney one, is one of my favorite movies. Absolutely love it. And to think that this is the train that generated that whole story and the heroics of the people involved.
I don't think you can see that.
That's just, you're holding up a
that's
glass
the
from
glass
it?
we bought there.
Yeah. So great. Okay. Trains. I will put that on my list. I've got a September 11th deadline to finish my current book, which I think I will make. If I'm not, my editor will come and find me. But right after that, I'll work on putting together a train day.
Dave, if you're interested in a great museum just outside St. Louis, there's the Museum of Transportation, huge number of locomotives, and some of the largest ones ever built. The largest locomotive that ever existed is there. It's you could easily spend a day wandering amongst those trains. My wife and I do Route 66 trips, and we spent as long as we could before they threw us out there. Great place.
Well, Route 66 would be another fun one. I mean, we did that. We stopped to see the jackalopes and all the other odds and ends. So if you have enough material, Don, someday to do a Route 66 tour, please take us on one.
I actually have 2 photo books of it. They're for personal use only. But yeah, I have 12,000 photos of Route 66.
Wow.
Well, maybe you can do 6,000 one week and 6,000 another week.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I actually have been thinking about putting together some stuff. So I'd be happy to do that if you have a weekend.
Yeah. Just let me know what date you'd like to do, and we can go do it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Great. Well, I tell you again, I was looking earlier. I started this 5 months ago. Whoever thought we'd still be stuck in our houses 5 months? You know, when I first put it together, I even thought, oh, do I want to spend the money on buying this pair of headphones? I might only use them once or twice, you know? So it's crazy how the world has changed. But I enjoy the chance of, you know, again, sharing some of the pictures and the memories and that sort of thing, rather than just leaving them bottled up in the computer. And I encourage each of you, you know, if you have your Route 66 trips or Dave's suggestion with trains and that sort of thing, we can continue to put things together. Maybe we can do a talk sometime on the first week of Epcot, and you know, subtitle. We had years to get ready for it, and then we figured out what. One of my favorite things was, I still remember arguing with people before we got it open about crowd control, you know, that we needed to put stanchions out and, you know, that sort of thing. And no, there was enough room in all the pre-shows. People were going to go into the things like energy. There was no need for stanchions or anything. Well, the week of it, and everybody just mobbing around. A week later, people are coring the concrete and drilling holes to put stanchions in and everything. So it was like years to get ready for it. And oops, it was a surprise. You know, who could have predicted? Everybody, but management. So anyway, again, appreciate it. Well, let's say Epcot, from Walt's mind, yeah, remarkable museum, and Amish country. Yeah, you know, there's so many great museums around the country and everything. And Carol and I have taken so many trips and, you know, traveled around and visited so many places that, again, you know, if there's a particular museum that you're associated with or nearby or whatever that you'd like to go and plug it, there's all sorts of places we have yet to see.
Remember,
you know,
the train hotel we stayed in Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania. Anybody ever go there? It's in Lancaster area. You can go and stay in a caboose. And it was at one point the most popular was the one that was painted like a giant Lionel caboose. But you could go, it's still there, and it's a great thing. You go in the restaurant, they have trains running around the restaurant. But my kids really got a kick out of staying in the train. They wanted to know what time the train was leaving. No, it's not going anywhere. But it's all painted up. You can stay in the Long Island Railroad caboose, or the Erie Lackawanna caboose, or the Pennsylvania, you know, caboose. So, you know, again, being a train nut, you know, we got there, you know, Carol was like, we're staying here, because it's sort of, it's a caboose. It's kind of confining sort of thing. But yeah, it was cool. We stayed, well, actually, I think we went there maybe twice, but yeah, fun stuff. And okay, great. Well, appreciate everybody joining, and off to lunch, cocktail hours. Well, somebody from Australia was saying this wasn't the most convenient time for him because it's the middle of the night. And I said, well, selfishly, I did it for me because I can do this, and now I can go to lunch. So it works great. So hope, for everybody in the East Coast, by the way, hope you all do well with the storm. I guess the remnants of Laura heading your way, and you know, hope it's not too bad. And you know,
that storm's just about out of here already. It's all the way up to where in New Brunswick, Canada.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty far up.
Yeah, I just know I saw so many pictures of it, you know, what it did in Louisiana and taking down trees and all the rest of it. And they said some of those poor people are going to be without power for a week or 10, 14 days or so. So it's, you know, heart just goes out to people dealing with that sort of stuff. So thank you much. I will stop the recording. And again, Maya, I will get in touch with you. If there's anything I could do to give you any history stuff for your exhibits, please do reach out to me. And again, it's Bill Cotter, worldfairphotos.com, and we'll look forward to being in touch and seeing you folks next week. And next week, we all have to start to talk by singing the jingle, Mommy, Daddy, take my hand, take me out to Freedom Land. So if you're from the East and you listen to Top 40 radio, that was burned into your brain. So thanks so much. Appreciate everybody joining.
Hey, thank you, Bill.
All right, bye.